Cryptozoology Show with your host, the Cryptozoologist. This show let us take an historic look at giants, the giants and Yeti, Bigfoot sort of connection, cryptid, the Amumungo. So, he's a Philippines wild man. I had told you about before this wonderful Philippines lady that was attacked by a giant bat monster. It's sort of thing, this evil vampire woman there. So the Philippines has some wild stuff out there, but from giant killer fish to all kinds of stuff, snakes the size of Mount Vesuvius, you name it. There's some wild character, like cryptid, creepy things that float around in the Philippines, right? I'm not an ornithologist, and I presume what was filmed is a piloted woodpecker, but nobody here can figure out 100% for sure, because there's some weird things about it. It has, like, seemingly a much more wider bill than any of us have ever seen on a piloted woodpecker before. Also, it was doing strange behavior. Never seen one of them do this, where this woodpecker was sort of going at this angle and seemingly like stripping sort of bark off the side of the tree doing stuff, right? But then it sort of flies over this sort of thing, and then but very cute anyways, like, so, you know, it's, to me, it's like people look at it, and if it's, that's what it is, great. But I just, like to know itself, and nobody that, where it was filmed and stuff, nobody knows exactly what it would, you know, 100%, because it's just weird. It does a couple of funny things. It's, odd, and, its beak was quite sort of more ivory-billish looking than the other. A decent size to it too, not like really huge like some of the ones I've seen on film and stuff like that. But anyway, it's a cute bird, whatever it is. It's got to be one of those two. I've seen lots of woodpeckers before in those piloted ones, and usually I can sort of tell for 100% sure, but it's just, it goes by a little bit fast and stuff like this, but just its behavior was a bit weird. I've never seen a woodpecker do this before, so I just, and the way he sort of did things was a bit odd. So anyway, but I'm sure somebody would know. But for sure there has been ivorybill woodpeckers still being seen and stuff, and we'll cover that later, and stuff like that. So, but anyways, as well, we're gonna, you know, cover some lots of different other little weird ins and outs. I'm going to have a goose monster there if I can find it by the end of the show. I still don't have it in here. But this fascinating weird bird was filmed that seems to be like some kind of half goose, half duck possibly of some sort, or some kind of weird thing like that. Never seen anything like it. I mean, he's got feet like a duck, except he's like 4 to 5 times the size easily of a duck. It's like an absolute monster. Way fatter than even the typical geese that come here. Completely sort of white, and he was really weird anyways, and so it was able, like, the film goes really close up to him a few times and stuff like that, so, but you can see him actually walking like a duck and stuff, yet he's the size of like in height easily of the normal sort of geese around. I think was a little bit taller actually, from that's what it looks like, but it's pretty huge, but its legs are way wider, like massively like a duck's, and the feet were absolutely titanic, like make any sort of goose you would ever normally see like look like a very extremely small compared to what these feet were. So quite a fascinating sort of creature anyway. So there sort of stuff like this. Oh, this is something, if this picture can be found, I might have saw one of the rarest birds that is supposedly extinct, but may not actually be. I have all these years been looking at, I was down, when these electric cameras first came out, somebody got me this crazy little sort of mini like spy camera, so I was all enthralled with it, and I wanted to check out these early video-like sort of stuff with it. So I went down to the river, and I was fishing away and stuff like this, and these two strange sort of ducks came flying down, and they just landed, and they had these weird they started coming closer to me, and I never seen any ducks like these in my life. They looked and acted like a duck. Everything was the same, right? So they had these like weird little pin-like stripes going all through them, like these jagged little weird sort of stuff going around, and I kept like this. So I was able to photograph them, but even though it's blurry and stuff like this, at least you can see them, and maybe possibly some ornithologist to back this up, maybe something in it because you can see some, and probably with some better software might be able to be enhanced enough that you could get the pattern on the duck. But these two ducks, they looked identical, yet they seemed to act like a couple. So it could, like, so I went through, I went that night, I went home and I looked through all these sort of ornithologist like books that I had around, which is quite a few of them, of different ones like that. I'm not a big bird watcher like these people stuff, and there's lots of them I don't remember their names and stuff, but if I don't recognize one, I'll sort of like just try and find out a bit about it and that sort of thing. And so I was able to get this, and I have still this camera, but I need the little plug-in for it to make it work, sort of thing, but because it's an older weird plug-in, a different sort. So, but anyways, I believe it's still on there, and I must have put it on some file somewhere. But anyways, whenever I can find it, what's fascinating about it is I kept researching through books, then I said, well, maybe it was an off-course sort of duck. So then I started looking for ones in other countries, everything from India's pink duck to all kinds of weird ones, right, which are supposed to be extinct too, but there's still sightings and stuff like this. But nonetheless, here I was going through some old stamps and stuff, and I was looking for this sort of thing. And I was looking online of different pictures of the old stamps and stuff and things, and as I'm going along, all of a sudden I see this picture there, and then it says on it, Labrador Duck. And I said, oh my God, I remember them when I was like, because I'd read about them, that they went extinct and stuff like this. The thing on it looks identical to what I saw. And so what if it's possible that actually, because the Ottawa River gets very strange sort of birds from time to time, and animals that get lost there and somehow they end up landing there. It's a common sort of thing. We've had even bears run downtown, all kinds of weird stuff. This river sort of interconnects to a lot of strange things all over. We've had everything from sharks to sea monsters, right? So, I mean, everything goes in the river, from giant prophylactic like monsters, you name it. There's a lot of weird stuff that float around in the Ottawa River. So, like, it could be that it's somewhere out sort of with this Labrador Newfoundland duck, there might be some in some little remote islands out there, and these guys got lost, because this is the only duck that matches the thing. All these ones, because I kept looking for a live species of duck, it never even occurred to me to do that, right? Like, so, but I'm just saying I might have actually saw two Labrador ducks in, I believe it was like the later 90s, probably. Maybe it was a bit later. Let's see here now. When was that? Yeah, no. Actually, it's a little bit later than that. It's I'd say about 2003 or 4 or something. Now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, because I wasn't even moved out at that place. Okay, so yeah, somewhere around in that range. Anyways, it was one of these early ones. There was still like a Windows XP wasn't even out yet or stuff like that. I can't remember what it was, if it was 98 still out at the time or whatever. But anyways, or 2000, one of those, you know. So, but around that time when I got this thing. So, so anyways, it's still on there, probably on this thing, because it had like a little miniature amount of you had to put like it had no sort of thing to put even an extra SD card in it. I don't think that I can remember that you could even do that. So basically all you got was like a certain amount of small little pictures, and that was it. But maybe it could be enhanced and sort of identify the duck, because I mean, they would seem to be a couple. They looked identical. I've never seen anything like them, and we get a lot of weird birds. There are all kinds, from wood ducks and different ones. We've had snowy owls here, all kinds of stuff, hummingbirds, different sort, all kinds of weird things that you'll see in this city from time to time and stuff like that, right? So whatever it was, if they weren't that, then I'd sure like to know what one, because I mean, I went through so many pictures of ones all through the United States, all the different sorts out there, from eastern, western U.S., Canada and everything, and just nothing sort of even comes close to this, but and sure damn well they look like exactly like those Labrador ducks, and nothing would make me happier on the planet if that was the case, if they're actually still in existence. I've heard of stories of people seeing them in the past and stuff like that, but I mean, wow, that'd be really lucky if that's what really actually occurred. But whatever they were extremely not a duck. I mean, I fished on this river over 5 decades, and I never saw them before or since. So, I mean, they could not be a local sort of variant of duck here. I've never seen anything like that. And I'm very seemingly lucky with these weird sorts of stuff like this. Like I said, I've even seen pine martens here. The one stood right in front of me while I was fishing. He was like 2 feet in front of my face. I got a picture of him. And then he scattered when I flashed the light on the camera because they started moving too much. But he was staring right at me. I mean, so animals, I guess they can sense it. I wouldn't harm them and stuff like that somehow. And so, like, probably, maybe you have better luck that way or whatever. But anyways, we'll go through a lot of this stuff here. But first, let's talk about the mighty giants here. I love giants. I've always been fascinated by this sort of thing. And this guy here was my early hero. I just absolutely love him. He was like one of the, even though he wasn't known as a cryptozoologist, he really was one. This guy was the most collector of the strange and the weird. He searched the world for the wackiest and weirdest stuff. There's a giant right there. So don't let the Smithsonian lie to you, and kids getting out of university and trying to talk sort of big to you, saying, no giants that exist, is all fabrication, blah, blah, blah. Like, this is, by the time you get through it, you'll quite clearly see that, yes, giants exist. It's quite clearly factual that, yes, hairy giants exist as well, and they live in our cave systems. And they have been since time began, and everybody is all humans. There is no such thing as different human species and stuff like this. They come in different sizes and shapes and forms depending on the environment and genetics. And it goes up and down, and all at the same time. You can have like the sort of from the Mayaka ape, sort of an ape man. There's probably an orangutan of some sort. You can have this sort floating around at the same time as what they would call like a chimp man, like the guy I showed you from where he was sleeping around in the trees there, our buddy, the wild man. Like, I mean, if that guy was found, 100% guaranteed they would say he was a different species of man and stuff like this. This is all complete, hogwash. Everybody's been the same since time began, and these giants did exist, and we're going to cover all kinds of monster ones throughout history, and I'll show you an astonishing amount of giants, and there's bazillions more out there that you could probably find, right? But anyways, we got quite a few here, and we got other sorts of giant things, from giant fish to giant, all kinds of bears and different stuff, so it's going to be a heck of a giant show. But anyways, I love Robert Ripley. I went and saw the Atacama little munchkin guy. That was the coolest thing ever, man. I mean, he's got it, this little tiny thing, and I mean, this dude's standing there. I mean, I would love to see one of these little guys and ladies there just running around out sort of thing. Even if I caught one, I wouldn't have the heart to keep them, because they're sort of, they got to be like some kind of little smart little humans of some sort, right? So, I mean, they would I wouldn't have the heart to do that, but I just like to look at one for a few minutes and then let him go. And just prove it to myself that they actually still exist, right? Because there is no doubt these skeletons have been tested. They've been found actually in other places too. In Russia, there seems to be a subterranean sort of group of little miniature people. They even found like miniature cutlery and pottery and stuff. I'm going to do a whole nother show about that because that seems to be my most popular show I've ever had. I've gotten at least thousands of views off of that one compared to some of the other ones, but that's sort of thing. So maybe this one will be they'll probably like this too with all the giants and stuff, and we're certainly going to cover a lot of them, and even my experience dating two giantesses there. That was pretty well. So anyways, we'll continue on here. So giants have been recorded through history for ages. Let us look at different papers and stories mentioning giants that might fit into this Sasquatch-like phenomena, along with the true monster giants of old that our giants of today may have been descendants of them. The stories are not in exact order and may go back and forth in history. Here's one of Truglow's many knowing guards here, Big Helga from Sweden on the left there, and she's chosen to get larger and be more macho. So what she's doing, she's only eating extra large Truglow approved poutines from Vanier Rotten Ronnie's. So she's down there, so if you see her down in Montreal Road and stuff like this, you'll know who she really is. Jeanguys been keeping an eye on her there, but he loses track of her quite often because he's got to turn around and make sure his werewolf ex isn't about to pounce on him there. So anyways, we'll continue on here. And we have like other things, giant bears, or all kind of weird stuff that we're going to cover here of different things. So, here my buddy there, Andre the Giant, what an amazing guy. I ran into him 3 separate times. And one time I actually touched his head. I was inside this, what the heck's the name of that place? The or something arena there in Montreal. Anyway, there's this sort of entrance that I was on the side of it back then. You could stand right around these people, and what they did, it wasn't the same like it is in these sort of times. And so I reached my hand over because he was walking past me, and I touched the top of his head, and he sort of started looking up at me like this, and I shot backwards, something like this. I was terrified he was going to grab me, and my hand looked like a minnow. I mean, this guy was so gigantic, and the next time I ran into him, the same thing down that main strip there in Montreal. We were there, one time we went on a Saturday or something like this, and we were just walking around looking at all these crazy stores and wild bars that they have. They're hilarious. Some of the weird stuff you'll see down there you'd never see any place on this planet. I don't know what it's like nowadays. I haven't been there in ages, but quite entertaining of a town if you want to see some much more wild things than Sasquatch could ever be. And then the other time I've seen him was at the Maple Leaf Gardens, man, and I mean, this guy was so gigantic, it was just absolutely wild. But in 1926 in Nayarit, Mexico, Englishmen unearthed giant skeletons that was said to be 10 feet tall. Now, one scientist commenting on the find said he was familiar with the legends of the giants that had lived there, and this guy was from the Smithsonian. You'll find this constantly through the thing, and just even for skeptics, critics, the whole gang here, think about it. Why never once you don't see where these reported where the guy was working for the Smithsonian? He's the guy that's reporting it in the New York Times or these different ones like this. If these things weren't true, You're telling me, like, you're an institution, like, let's say they kept printing every, weekend that the FBI is, shooting the citizens or something, right? Whatever, right? Like some wacky thing. You're telling me that the people wouldn't sort of either get another newspaper to say, hey, they're lying, don't believe this newspaper, they're full of crap, we never did this or any of this. You don't ever see any of these. All of a sudden, in 5 minutes, this one curator, because he thought it didn't, the giants didn't mix in with the evolution stuff, so he wanted them abolished. So they started removing all this sort of stuff, and they've been lying about this sort of stuff ever since. A guy sued them successfully, and that sort of thing like that, and they had to admit that they got rid of this. So giants exist, and yes, there was truly. So don't believe this scientific mumbo jumbo that claiming something can be this big. I mean, that's so silly. There was brought to so all kinds of stuff. You don't know how the body would change to fit such a thing. Maybe their bone mass ratio is different. Who knows? Like, because it's a giant, right? Like, so I mean, that's complete hogwash. Like, and there's massive proof throughout history that giants existed. There's no doubt about it. And little people. Right? So anyways, we'll go through a whole bunch of them here. And you'll find it fascinating, and especially a lot of people think women were, there was a lot of giantesses too. I mean, you find just as many of them floating around as the giants pretty well. In Rouen in 1830, a giant was on exhibit that was 10 feet tall. A giant named Galabra was said to be around 10 feet tall, brought from the Arabia to Rome in Caesar's time. So that, you can imagine him in the old Colosseum. He must have been pretty macho out there. He'd be swinging around and stuff like that. He'd be a good scrap with a smaller dragon or all that kind of stuff. Young Cyclops guy. He's a gang, right? Look at the size of this dude, man. He would have been fun to hang out with. That's a good party, guys. Can you imagine that guy giving you a karate chop? Just one thing of me, wow. Look at his size of it. Unbelievable. But here's that big Kwong or Big Roll. Name's Barry. I have no idea what his real name was. This giant was on film, was supposed to be found in old archives of films in Japan, and then was used in a movie. See, there's a lot of weird things there. There's some shows where these guys will sort of lie a little bit, and they're not actually telling you fully the truth. Okay, here's the weird thing about this film. The original sort of story, from what I could track down, was that this director had found it, and from this, like, either 1912 or 1921, something like that, like this early sort of archival film he found, and it showed this giant guy, and he's walking along, and that's the film that you see when he goes, oh, like this. But in the movie, he cartoonizes and does different sort of stuff here and things, but apparently he said that the footage, he found that in their archives, and then just used it in the film. But then other people sort of say, no, they sort of, they found out that it was used, that it was like fake because it's like it comes from a film. It really doesn't, according to the original story. So this is, for me, I don't know what to really think. I'll just leave it on the fence sort of thing. But one lady said that he would have made a magnificent adult film star. That was pretty funny, but I'd imagine the McMahons would have loved him. He certainly would have made an awesome wrestler. But no matter what, whoever they got originally to do this or whatever, that boy looks pretty huge, man. He's stupid. He's not I don't know. Like, I mean, it's one of these things, right? So people are going to argue on the, but from this is the original sort of account that it really wasn't sort of that part of the film you see with him walking with the horses and stuff is supposedly authentic. After that, then it's sort of mixed all in or whatever. So I don't know. Right. So, but anyway, so we certainly have piles of giants here that we can prove existed. So, and we'll move on with them. Here another giant, this Asian man here, height unknown, but he looks pretty huge. There was a giant named Phantom that lived in the time of Eugene, and he was said to be 11.5 feet in height. So pretty huge, man. That's don't want to mess with that boy. So here in Atacama giant show, and the giants were depicted in all kinds of places like that. There was this king. They found his bed, and his bed was like about, what the heck was it again? Was it like 28, some kind of like in height, like massive, 18 to 20 some feet high of a sort of a bed, and it was made out of iron and all this kind of stuff like this. This guy's armor weighed like about 1,000 pounds. Okay? This guy, he must have been likely probably about 18 feet tall, sort of thing. That's just one of them. There was all kinds of them like this where they actually found like suits and weird stuff that this person must have been a titanic size. I'll show you one that a monk had there. I mean, unbelievable. But look at the size of this bear here, man. Look at that. I mean, even poor our buddy the Sasquatch might have a bit of issues with this dude. He's a monster. Look at the size of that behemoth, eh? Isn't that terrifying? But poor creature, I feel sorry for it, actually. Like, I mean, wow, what a monster, though, eh? But apparently this thing kept going at this guy, and he finally died right in front of his head. The bear was just about to get him. He had to keep blasting it and stuff like that. I saw other pictures of it with his head up with the guy, and I mean, unbelievable. I mean, just the most craziest thing you ever seen in your life. I mean, terrifying. And can you imagine there's giant ones reported even like twice plus his size, these giant bears in the sort of way up north and stuff like that, in some of these remote sort of areas of Alaska to all through the Northwest Territories and Nunavut and these kinds of places like that. Occasionally you get these monster sort of sightings of these mega bears that are way bigger than polar bears or any other sort of one, right? The scientists actually found a job, one of these isn't that old, so it proves that well, and I mean, I don't even, like I said, their dating stuff is, but this thing isn't rotted at all. I mean, you can clearly see it probably died not massively long ago. I wouldn't be surprised. It looked pretty fresh. And, but anyway, certainly it proves that man really did, see a giant bear here of epic sizes, like 15 feet plus sort of stuff here, right? So, there's all kinds of stories out there of these sort of giants, and certainly we'll prove here by the end of this that giants exist in all kinds of, sorts of, different sorts here. Here, this guy, his name was Big Suit. So, you wouldn't want to, if that guy's, giving you the ticket there, it's yes, sir. It's sort of, I don't think that too many people want to be arguing with this fellow, but absolutely fascinating. But he was said to be near like 8.5 feet in height, right there, somewhere around this range. So. Pretty huge, man. What a monster. The Chevalier Scrogg, on his journeys, he had noted, found a head of a giant, and it had 60 teeth and thought to be at least 15 feet tall skeleton. So, quite the monster. Here are the new Brothers of Destruction, the raw talent scouts are looking at. You can see here. Can you imagine? They'd be too useful brothers to have. You're in the hood there and stuff like this. These boys will take care of any problems there. Look at the size of these monsters, eh? But I bet you they were scared of Mama. She looks feisty. Back in those days, the mothers were royal. But this guy loves fish as much as me, pretty well. Any person that would do this, I mean, the poor giant ocean sunfish there, he was actually trying to give it mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. So he's even got over Jimmy Houston there. Jimmy's the best man, fantastic actor. Is there stuff like this, but he always kisses like the fish of the show and stuff like this. And I've done this. I kissed 60-plus-inch muskies a few times over the years and stuff like this. I certainly understand the love of these sort of things, but maybe his problem was to be how to use fluorescent. Maybe the poor ocean sunfish there. But I'm kidding aside, though. Seriously, sadly, the poor ocean sunfish there, he didn't make it ever. But aren't they magnificent beasts and stuff like this? This guy actually, there's been a few over the ages where people have actually hooked one on a rod reel. That's so must have been a wild, interesting scrap there. There was a guy that got a oarfish off of a pier once in England. I mean, the guy actually scrapped with an oarfish, man. That must have been a wild thing. Here in old times, you can see for sure giants of true epic size existed, and these stories aren't exaggerated. There really was super. Look at this. Like, you'll get these characters that'll try and say it was natural erosion. This is the most foolishest thing in the world. Other scientists and all kinds of them, they're mathematicians and everything, will tell you that they would be, the odds would be like, that 1 trillion stars would fly up the rectum of Bigfoot before that this could occur. That's a sort of idea, right? Like, I mean, so it's impossible that was by like erosion and stuff like this, or ancient. So, and they certainly weren't a guy in a wooden foot walking around, right? So, like, I mean, they existed, and there was narrow sort of pecan, more like our typical sort, and these wider, big-footish sort here, like this, So, I mean, they certainly existed. No doubt about this. Here's another one. A giant named Farragus was slain and said to be 28 feet tall by the nephew of Charlemagne. So, I mean, quite supposedly an historic sort of record, and I wouldn't doubt it at all. I know they existed. There's no question in my mind. I mean, every culture on the planet, they have all kinds of mentions of it. I mean, it makes sense. They wouldn't exist long just because somebody's a giant, you're, 30 feet tall. I mean, little natives could hide around a corner with sort of bow and arrows of poison, all kinds of stuff. When you could sort of get them down in numbers because you would find them extremely dangerous and sort of stuff like that. And these cataclysms like the flood or whatever, even if you refuse to believe in a flood, even though they admit now that the world was flooded at one point and stuff, but instead of agreeing with the scientist guy, they sort of, in order to accept his findings, he had to compromise and said that it must have been an iceberg that took 10 million years to melt once in a while, and then it would cause this flood. But whatever, right? Like, bottom line is there was a flood, the proof of it from the top of the Himalayas all over the place, and probably certain groups of people would go up into caving systems trying to beat the flood. They maybe got lucky and found air pockets, some kind of underground thermal like stuff where there was another subterranean like sort of environment of some sort. Who knows? Like, I mean, where some of them could survive the thing. They might have been in numbers enough to keep breeding and mating again. Meanwhile, the other modern type of man, the ones that were dropped off of Noah's ship there, that gang then continued on the regular way and then finally started in big enough numbers, spreading, fighting all across the world, and started running into these cave-like people again. Very peaceful. So, like, all I can tell you is that humans come in all kinds of varieties of shapes and sizes. There is no such thing as this Piltdown man and this man and all this. This is, all these same varieties could be found today with the same kind of craniums, the same kinds of everything, same kinds of stuff. I showed you the ape man from Morocco and the Iran guy, both of these supposedly from wild people that rape these ladies. It's common practice, and we'll mention this later with the Yeti stuff. All of these guys do the same thing because they're like a wild human, some of them, right? And certainly giants existed, right? So, I mean, why people sort of deny this or find weird is, again, just because it was mentioned in the Bible, then the scientific world wants to sort of try and discredit that at any cost, sort of idea. But I mean, just because the Bible says that has no relevance to proving about these other sorts of things, it just would acknowledge just another thing that the Bible is accurate again when it comes to these sorts of stuff. When they mention dragons, all these things existed. They wouldn't put it in there if they didn't. Because all the rest of it is proven right. Again, like I said, forget about the spiritual, what you believe God really is or not, or any of that sort of stuff. We're talking about stuff that we can 100% guarantee prove that yes, Bethlehem existed, or this place or that or whatever. These kinds of stuff you find now historic records where they found these places. They found the cave there where probably Jesus had his feet bathed in oil, and all kinds of stuff like this. It's got the symbols of John the Baptist in it, everything like they described. All these things were reality in these kinds of ways, right? So the rest you can't prove, but these parts you can. So when they told you that a flying serpent existed, they did. There was such things. There were some kind of dinosaurian, sort of family of lizardy sort of stuff. People argue saying something like it's not a dinosaur, but that's what the original meaning meant, was terrible lizard, right? So we're not arguing about classifications of families here and stuff. We're just using the terminology lizard as some kind of, you know what I mean, a big creepy sort of lizard monster, right? Sort of thing. So all these things existed. They truly did, and giants existed, and all these kinds of stuff. And all this other stuff is just, it's not, it doesn't have really, it's just theory. While these are things you actually can find in the ground all over the place, backing what these historic people tell you, right? The sort of thing. So very, very interesting. And there's tons of these all over the place. I mean, so many of them, it's mind-boggling. We get with this on the show that I'd mentioned before about this giant fly. Okay? Son of a gun, I just solved the damn thing. I was looking for giant more stuff and stuff to add to this show and things like this, and all of a sudden I see this giant. I said, oh my God, that looks identical to what I saw, except the one that I saw was pitch black. So here I was looking for a Canadian sort of fly. I didn't sort of think of that sort of but I use this bait all the time, Cicada, since many moons ago, and stuff like that, and you use it for fly fishing, weird things like that. But this is, I never saw one of these giant cicadas before, and I didn't look up sort of something like that because I never even thought of that, but they're apparently through Texas and sort of stuff like this. So what I found was a wayward sort of giant cicada. So isn't that fascinating? Because maybe they're known to breed here. In any of the sort of books that I've seen of Canadian sort of ones or that sort of stuff, they didn't mention anything like this. And even the U.S. ones, you don't see most of it like this because they're more, I guess, like a southern sort of one typically. So maybe he got in through some kind of crates, food, shipping, whatever, flew here off course. I have no idea, but very fascinating. But anyways, there's the other mystery, just like my click bug. But still, the click bug does not match the other click bugs I can find online or in any books so far and stuff like that. So if you're an entomologist, if you're interested, there might be a new species of click bug that lives on the Ottawa River, on the Quebec side, in the sort of right over in the Hull sort of region. Just start going along marshy-like areas like this that are in little bays and stuff. And this guy had snagged into some reeds. We went in there, and this bug sort of fell off of the reeds seemingly and landed in there. So it had a gigantic, brilliant sort of orange dot. It was pitch black with these weird sort of funny, I don't know, almost a different, silvery, color of a sheen, but almost black. It's so hard to explain, but anyways, it had these little lines underneath it that were really creepy. This was the creepiest bug I've ever seen. Anyways, it took ages to solve that mystery, but I found them. They're called click bugs, and sort of stuff like this. So here I just saw my other one. Look at this. This guy looks like friggin' Count Dracula. Can you imagine meeting him at a castle? And he says, "Come on in. I want you to sit for dinner." I think, holy mackerel, man. I don't know about that. That guy looks like he could suck the blood right out of you there in a couple of minutes. and that's only him. Can you imagine what Igor might look like? Sure, that's a pretty wild, but holy cow, that guy's pretty creepy one. So giants exist of all sorts here, from this monster cutthroat trout back in the day to look at this monster here. Isn't that cat magnificent? Isn't he just the most magnificent thing I've ever seen? I mean, absolutely unbelievable. I would love to pet that dude, man. Oh my God, he's just so friggin' holy cow, man. Look at the size of that monster. I bet she's once she probably roars at the door like my crazy pet there, holy mackerel, man. Like this, you know, these sorts of stuff, and but I can imagine one like this. He's like, this guy's like King Kong, man. So it just goes to prove giants can exist and all sorts of stuff. I mean, this guy would rival right in there with the Exmoor beast there. Isn't he magnificent, man? What a monster. Wonderful sort of thing. In Iran, another giant was found that could fit a full bushel inside of his skull, and he was 19 feet tall. So can you imagine, eh? Wow. It's quite the monster. Now here was this giant. There was this guy, this monk. He actually they got this amongst his possessions. This guy collected all these fascinating things from Ecuador back in the 20s. Could you imagine the size of the monster that wore this crown? Look at that. I mean, unbelievable, man. That guy must have been a monster. A monster. Right? So, like, I mean, so these archaeological finds are all over the place. Some people deny this. It was a city of giants they found. They never believed that it was a thought legend for a gazillion years sort of idea. And, finally, they found it. There was like 80, 90, 70, 60, 50-pound hammers, these kinds of stuff that they found all over the place. Big tracks still in there of these giant footprints. I mean, these guys were monsters, actually. And these stories, like at Stonehenge, that Merlin got these giants to bring may actually be true. Maybe that's really how they did move these stones as sort of stuff. Actually, this is fascinating. I was watching the show, and this guy, it wasn't really about Bigfoot sort of, but it was more just about like wild wolves sort of out in Alaska and all these kinds of places like this, and wild sort of native people and different weird stuff, and they found this ancient tribe sort of structure. And this structure was like, they couldn't believe it was way out, broad out in the middle of nowhere, yet these stones were Titanic sort of size here, sort of thing like this, but they knew it belonged to this race of sort of, they were supposedly pretty big, sort of hairy-legged sort of people, right? So, again, you got another sort of thing like this where just certain groups that might have been sort of way more hairy, right, that lived wild amongst us all these times and stuff like this, but certainly giants and real mega-sized monsters existed in the past. Here, I wonder back in the day if someone was trying to boss her around, if she said, "Listen, Cracker, get your own tea." So, you want to feed her out there? Look at the size of that lady, eh? Isn't that amazing? Absolutely astonishing. Quite the interesting sort of character. But in 1623, in a castle in Dauphine, a tomb was found, and it was like 16 feet wide, 8 feet high, okay, and it had it inscribed on it, this, sorry, we'll have to, just for a second here, Yeah, sorry, it was like 30 feet long and 8 feet high and 16 feet wide, and it had inscribed on it, Cantalochus rex. Cantalochus rex. So, the skeleton was found in full, and it was 25 feet and 25 and 1/2 feet in height, 10 feet across the shoulders, and 5 feet from breastbone to the back. Could you imagine the size of that Goliath? So that's pretty terrifying. He's just quite the monster there. So, but she had a great face there, a good style. I like her hat. Quite the giantess, anyway. Here, look at this wonderful beast. Isn't he magnificent? Look at this. I bet you he's the same thing. I bet she wakes her up. Give me some more chow. She probably has to do a second shift just to feed this boy. But here in Palermo, Sicily, in 1516, they found a giant that was 30 feet tall. And this guy says here, skeptics say there's no Exmoor beast. He's a runt compared to me, baby. So there he is. There's the real sort of there's some big cats around there. Look at the great ears on him, and everything. Isn't he magnificent? Great stuff. Here's a big stud, Robert Wadlow there. Look at the lady's face, man. Isn't that hilarious? I mean, she's smiling from ear to ear there. So she looks impressed with a big stud Wadlow there. This is actually a real photograph. This was taken in that big building there. I forget which one. And they got him to actually lean up against this sort of thing. But in Sicily, in 1559, there was this giant found there that was 44 feet tall. So I wonder what she would have thought of him. Look at the serious guard guy in the back, even him. All of them got great faces on them. That's fantastic. What a magnificent photo. Here is the photo of the Oink Nest monster there. You can see him. Rumors has it that Rotten Ronnie's investors are trying to create a race of giant pig beasts to produce cheaper bacon than their fake bacon the crap that they use nowadays in a lot of places, right? Rumors have it that they will make this new bacon from mutant cryptid sewer pigs that live in the sewers of England. Rumor has it that they captured a group of these mutant oikers, and now they've become like the breeding bunch phenomena. They're multiplying by the second in this laboratory that's hidden in Hyde Park there, and they're secretly breeding them, and they want to, see if they can produce them cheaper than this fake bacon stuff that they're used to, right? So, but another rumor is they had hired an ancient relative here of McChef Boyardee here on the right, certain thing, right? And to find new products that could be made with this mutant Hyde Park bacon monster there. So Jeanguy was down here visiting stuff like this, and Mr. Redford. Both of these guys mentioned that there's sightings of these half man, half pig beasts there. So some of them seemingly have escaped from them. This McDee's and Army outrageous lab that's hidden around there. So pretty scary there. I don't know about that, man. That's pretty wild. But in Magrino, they had found a giant whose head was the size of a horse head and 30 feet tall in 1816, and he had teeth weighing like on average of 5 ounces. Could you imagine? That sort of there? So, geez, I keep looking at this guy, Chef Boyardee there, and I keep getting a weird craving for that mutant ravioli or one of those ones. Anyway, so we'll continue on. Here I used to hang out with a giant guy like this, and that's what we'd look like walking around. So everybody needs a big little buddy there, so he certainly was definitely a good bodyguard to have. Look at the size up there. Yes, boss. All that kind of stuff. Well, what a monster, man. But a great style they had back in the day. Hey, look at the outfits have been wild. Fantastic stuff. I mean, just unbelievable how they used to dress back in those days. You know, people, everything was just like this sort of men in blackish sort of stuff. Very interesting. But this giantess here has a cute face, and at least if anyone bothered you, she can take care of it for you as well. She's actually a pretty girl, but look at the size of that lady. That's amazing here. Yeah, I was wondering, this big boy here, this big Russian guy there, if he goes into the bar and says, "I said a 60-ounce shot of vodka, bartender." And this is his little buddy here. But look at the size of that monster, right? Unbelievable, eh? How many sort of that? There was supposedly, there's a rumor that there was this giant buried around the tower, that Eiffel Tower there, in France. I mean, of this mega giant that was there at one point or something like this. It's hard to follow these things, but anyway, somewhere around in there. And then I had mentioned on the other previous show about there was a giant in that catacombs too that was supposed to be there too. That was another one I could have put in here. A true story, when I was a young fellow there, I started going out with this, one of the tallest women ever, probably that's ever been around. She was well 6 foot something, way high up there. I can't remember exactly what, but she was like, just unbelievable, sort of thing like this. And so I kind of look like this, and this girl kind of looks a little bit like her, sort of like she was that sort of shape to her, and that sort of with the blonde hair and that sort of thing. Anyways, she wanted to go to this dance and stuff like this, and we started going out for a bit, and I have photographic memory with sort of stuff, and when I saw this, it reminded me of that, and then I remembered the crazy letter she had given me, this serious love letter when you're young and all this kind of stuff, and she's going on it, she says, "I can't make up my mind between you," and we'll call the guy Floyd. So she couldn't make up between her mind between myself or Big Boy Floyd, rates or stuff like this. So, but anyways, we go to this dance there like this, and the boys' faces in this dance, and where I was, I'm telling you, for a young guy, I was doing pretty good for the evening. But anyway, and then my another one that I dated that was a giantess as well, not as tall as that one, but pretty close. But she was a lot more broad-shouldered than this lady here, but she was very much like this one here. And I mean, if you were late, if you tried to take a cookie or do any misbehavior of any sort, well, it was you were in big trouble. So thank goodness her family moved away, or I would have been petrified just to. But anyway, she was a giantess like that. But the blondie originally was a lot more friendly, but this giantess here was a lot more stern. She was a blondie too, but she had a much different sort of shape than this lady, but same kind of sternness to her there. So so pretty funny, but. Very entertaining, and it was, but I actually can still see the sort of letter in her sort of handwriting and stuff like this. The letter was this weird sort of color of blue, and they were on these papers, like, and it sort of went back and forth, sort of like this. But anyways, she was an absolute giantess and stuff like this. I mean, just unbelievable, the height of this girl. just mind-boggling. But anyway, fascinating sort of stuff. But so she ended up, Big Floyd ended up. So she ended up dating eventually a Big Floyd sort of thing, and I have no idea if her and Floyd became Floyd or not or whatever. But anyway, pretty entertaining. But this is when you're young, right? But lots of laughs. I enjoyed it. She was really nice. But I enjoyed both of them. I didn't care. I mean, this girl was sort of like German, right? And I mean, she was sort of like, her family was all stern and serious. These people back in those days, it was, a lot of kids were raised around adults and stuff like this. There was less kids around, especially in the Canadian market and stuff like this. The population was low. And so they were quite stern, a lot of them, and weird stuff like this. So they all had this serious sort of attitude and this very structured, like, sort of stuff. So I understood these things and just figured, okay, piss this girl off, don't be late, and don't try and take a cookie off of the table. Pretty simple, right? So, but anyway, besides that, she was very entertaining, and she had beautiful eyes and a pretty face and all that sort of stuff. So, but she was just very stern. So anyway, we'll move along. Everybody needs a big buddy and a little buddy here, like these two here guys. Look at this! Isn't that great? What a magnificent photo! I mean, how can you beat that? Absolutely astonishing. Great stuff they had back in the day. So here's exactly what I look like with her at the dance. So as you can imagine, it's like this. I wonder if, as she said in this, she looks pretty stern here. She says, "You're in big trouble, mister. When you get home, smile, smile." Because back in those days, people hated to get their photograph. They had to get all dressed up and stuff like this. Boy, she gets quite the bling. I got to give her effort there. She certainly took a lot of time and pride in her sort of dress and everything else. You wouldn't want to take a cookie from her anyway. She could pretty handle you there pretty good. Look at that wild crown, isn't that fascinating? And sort of stuff like this. It looks like her ears are. I don't know if that's part of just the outfit, or does she really have like big pointy ears? This is probably part of the outfit, I guess. But anyway, it's fascinating, wild stuff. I like the outfit is just astonishing. It even matches like with the cane and the whole weirdness. Like, I mean, what an outfit. Fascinating. So here was this giant 2,000 pound giant ray caught in our mutant canal. This was on display there. I have in the Dragons and Monster one of my other shows there. I got one way bigger than this one, and it was an albino monster of some sort, right? But fascinating. I mean, that one, I forget what they said. It was like huge, like way bigger than this dude. A monster here with pulled through over a 50-pound scale, a weight fully not known, but landed that with 2-pound test line on purpose. Used a downrigger with an elastic, lowered it down in the steep hole underneath the bridge, and drifted it with sort of like a frozen minnow and a little piece of a smelly sort of concoction that I had mixed up and stuff like this, and drifted it down there and just held it there. And because I knew if you had sinkers on it or anything like this, it was likely going to sort of break it, I put a little bit of a shock leader, so that way, just in case if it rubbed up against the skills, I might still have a chance, and things like that. And I just used like a 6-pound test shock leader as sort of and to sort of hold the hook and the bait on, but it was using 2-pound line as the main line. And I nailed the thing, popped the rigger. I nailed into this dude, and there he is. It took quite a long time to do it, but it was just patient and slow and stuff like that. It was using a modified sort of rod for this that I'd sort of designed for these kinds of stuff, that was very long and sort of, from an old fly rod and things like that, and redesigned it sort of so that it can handle lighter line and this kind of thing, right? So, but definitely monsters existed much more in the past. You still do, but, and definitely there is still some monster sturgeon floating around, but, very interesting, anyways, what was back in the day, certainly before we started bringing in all these zebra mussels and all kinds of stuff, right? So, but, anyways, we'll go on to the next ones here. And here's the biggest monster that I've ever seen was Ogopogo there. Here's me tussling with him there. But quite the monster there. Met another lady from Newfoundland that was out there with her boyfriend, and they had saw it and stuff like this. So I was lucky that I wasn't there that long, and I actually saw this thing. I fully had believed all this time it was probably a sturgeon or different things like this, and no, it's not. I don't really know what it is, but it's Angolish-like, but it seemed to swim a little bit different, so I don't know. But something unnatural lives in Lake Okanagan or visits it somehow through some underwater caverns or what have you and stuff like this, and is a way more better chance of you actually getting something on film or anything, so water's clear, better, sort of a way better hunting environment, sort of than Loch Ness or these kinds of ones here. This guy would have been fun to hang out back in the day, like if he'd be coming along and I'm telling somebody about the big muskie that I just let go, you know, with him, he could cooperate for you, say, yeah, it was this big. He looks like a real jovial fellow. He must have been fun. But there's a gang there, so isn't that a magnificent photo? That girl was really cute. The one on the right there, had a very pretty face. Here's the Sisters of Destruction here. You wouldn't want to peeve those two of them. They make good bodyguards there. Like their big hats there. And their serious mama probably looks like, they almost look like Gypsy, like a little bit or something like that. Isn't she fascinating, eh? The lady, I presume it's probably their mother or something, but quite the face on her. She has a lot of charisma, sort of, right? But, here's what I wanted to mention there. This is really one of the, besides the Tuca the monster there, these are the two most authentic sea monsters ever in history, sort of thing like this. But I think the last time I said blue whale in the middle of the night, I was trying to talk about species of whales with teeth, sperm whales, things like that. We're not talking, blue whales can get up to about 120 feet. I don't believe this creature was that long. But this amazing sort of beast here really was the most astonishing thing ever. I mean, you can see the gill here on it. I blew it up better this time here and stuff like this. So to me, I believe it was an ancient fish of some sort, Ichthyosaurus, Mosasauri type of sort of thing here. Which one it is, this I don't know, sort of thing. They can argue about that sort of thing. But anybody suggesting it was a whale or any of this stuff is complete hogwash. It has no blowhole. You can't even find nostrils in the front of it. It definitely was a fish, because you can see here the sort of a gill line. It probably breathes sort of like, like a fish would, sort of thing like this. You can see his, even here his fin is in perfect sort of shape here. It's not even eaten away yet. All the dragon scales on it all along. The creature was just magnificent. Look at his teeth here. Isn't he just the most magnificent beast? He was so non-rotted yet that even his eye is fully intact. Right? And the reason this is why we'd never see such a creature, they probably, I mean, I doubt he's a surface hunter. Maybe he could be, but I mean, he's probably like a deep water sort of a fish that hunts, I don't know, giant squid and all that kind of sort of stuff like that. But he's certainly a living dinosaur of some sort, right? So this guy was around in the 1800s here in Newfoundland. There's my buddies, the Newfs there, the greatest people you ever, right? and this sort of thing there. But look at the size of the eyeball with that dude's head, though. Seriously, man, isn't that something? So, but anyways, you know, for all you Darwin skeptics, all the sort of people out there, no matter what, living dinosaurs exist, and certainly this was one of these ones. Like, so one way or the other, whether dinosaurs are thousands of years old or millions or any of this kind of stuff, bottom line is that this creature made it to our more modern times anyways, and probably still exists. I wouldn't be surprised in the sight. It's just not so, I mean, you couldn't catch that really in a net. It would bust through the nets probably in a second, and this sort of thing, and the odds of you running across it would be slim. And I mean, there's all kinds of deep water giant squid and other monsters that this thing can eat, and probably even Megalodon would be running for the hills from this one. So quite the monster. What an amazing creature. Amazing. But anyways, we'll go on to the next one here. Look at this big giant dude, Flemish rabbit here. Look at the size of that monster. That's like those cryptid bunnies I told you about out in Colorado and stuff like that, except they're way more furry, sort of like a Bigfoot, Yeti sort of thing, right? But aren't they cute? Isn't that something? Look at the size of them, right? But I'd be worried if this giant hadn't had his lunch here. I want that Hassenpfeffer. Give me that. I want that bunny in my belly. Sort of stuff, right? So I mean, I don't know if that Flemish bunny wants to hang out with our big buddy here. Look at the size of that monster, right? Wow, look at the size of the guy's hands, man, compared to that dude's head. Unbelievable. Hey, here's my old buddy Andre there again. That's what I looked like when he went past me there. See? My goodness, man, what a monster. He was a big friendly giant, though. Great stuff. Look at this guy. He'd been a fantastic bodyguard. I'd love hanging out with him, man. He looks cool. I love these top hats, man. Those people were dressed back in the day. That's fantastic stuff. I'd probably look ridiculous, but I mean, maybe a slash one would be good, but this sort probably, it might not fit. But anyways, extremely entertaining. But look at the size of him, Wow. Now, I was thinking that, you know, those giants or giantesses, those big monster ones we've been talking about there, I mean, you know, that's pretty scary. They'd go down, they'd grab you, and they'd be, you know, munching down on you and stuff like this, and it's all over, right, like this. So I figured, I mean, if I was going to be attacked by a real giantess, like the real ones of ancient times, this is the one. So I mean, I got, I mean, if I could find a flying time machine, and if I got captured by one of these giantesses, that's the way I want to go down. Whoever did this, that's magnificent. Isn't that cute? That's funny. Great stuff. So here are this giantess from Germany. They said she had the most perfect figure, like sort of for like her proportions and all that sort of stuff like that. So pretty girl there. I don't know what the hell she's got in her hand. Is she hanging a mouse there? What the hell that thing is? But anyway, it's something there. Pretty strange. But anyways, quite the hat on her there, and she's got some kind of early Victoria like secret going on. It seems of some sort or something like this, but fascinating. And then look at this giant tree. When I was down in California when I was a kid, there was a tree you could drive through. I mean, just unbelievable. But look at the size of that thing, eh? So giants exist in all sorts here. I mean, just absolutely crazy. But isn't that mind-boggling? Look at the size of that. Extraordinary. Here's another big boy here. Look at the size of this giant here. Quite the monster. In 1819, a woman watched a soldier dig up a giant at a place called Perisma, and then she watched them rebury it from orders of the Padre, and it was said to be 12 feet tall. So right in perfect sort of Sasquatchy like ranger of these heights and sort of stuff like this. Here, Anna Marie, another giantess there. So seemed like a nice girl there, sort of thing. Like, but wow. The height of her age is amazing, but she had probably, like, I think I guess there's a cane in her hand there and stuff like that. She probably had trouble walking. Some of them do and stuff like this, right? But, wow. But, man, it must have taken half the day just to get dressed. It's sure stuff crazy. They had quite the outfits back in the day there. The father looks a bit wolf-manish there. Sort of stuff like this. But those were how the pictures went back in the day there. This member of the Hay Foundation of New York had dug up a 9-foot 2-inch skeleton, and several were said to be measuring over 7 feet. I was wondering here, this giant cowboy. You have to have a giant cowboy. Thank goodness they got a giant cowboy. You gotta have one of those. Yippee-yi-yi. You imagine this guy, instead of using like, the John Wayne Colt-like things or whatever, right? This guy would have been pulling out like Winchesters on the side there. Big rifles, right? That would have been his handgun, sort of stuff like this. But can you imagine if he had been with Roger and Bob when Patty was going there in '67? This guy would have been like that sheriff. He could have easily lassoed Patty there and might have been able to handle with her there, but so the mystery would be over and we wouldn't be all sort of arguing about this Patterson film all this time. This is the boy we needed back in the day that would have joined them. The trio would have made history. But anyway, fascinating. Here, this lady here with her gold boy hops. She ruled him with an iron fist there, sort of thing. But look at the outfit on this woman, eh? Isn't that wild, eh? With the wild crown and the robes and all this kind of stuff like this. She looked pretty stern there. I'd imagine I'd be fairly grumpy too if you had to sit there and put on these 10,000 robes and these different stuff just to even stand there to get a photograph, I suppose. But so maybe that's why she looks grumpy. Maybe she was nice. But here, in 1933, a skeleton of a male turned up that was over 8 feet. That was found by a kid looking for arrows. So there's another one there, sort of thing. Here this giantess might have said, "Don't be messing with me, little boy." Look at the size of her head. Oh my goodness, man. That's unbelievable. In Ohio, a skeleton was found in 1800s that was thought to be of a man at least 8 feet, 1.5 inches. And we've already shown you here ones that would be probably some of them in getting around these sorts of ranges. That one guy showed you was 8.5 and stuff like this. So, I mean, these are authentic things. There was all kinds of them. How anybody does this, and this Professor Thomas Wilson, curator of the prehistoric anthropology at the Smithsonian Institution, after he looked at them, he said their authenticity of the skull is beyond any question. So, I mean, how they were told to sort of change all this sort of stuff and just deny that they ever existed. But I mean, think about it again. I mean, would you not, like every week you got this report that the Smithsonian Institution's being reported that they found 50-foot giants and 30-foot and 10 feet and all these kinds of stuff. Why would not the Smithsonian once in another paper even say, hey, you're lying, there's no such a thing like this? The other paper would have sold millions of copies, all this kind of stuff. But you don't see this because these things were actually true. They really were reported by the Smithsonian. And like I said, they got sued and had to admit all this sort of stuff. So, I mean, these things are factual. Giants existed, and it's as simple as that. It's that, and I mean, so why people are skeptical of them, I find weird. Now, a lot of people would think this photograph is fake on the right. It's actually real. And what it was is that this girl was known as one of the tallest girls around at the time, and she was at this sort of miniature park. So the things you're seeing in the background are actually from this miniature park, but it's an actual real photograph. It's just like an optical illusion sort of thing, but she really was yeah, you know what I mean, like there and really was this sort of tall like that. This lady here and this fascinating one here, a fantastic outfit there. That's very interesting. Look at the hair, incredibly healthy hair there. Stuff. But in her hand there, this lady here is, I mean, look at this. I think she's got a Yeti on her shoulder there. So, but, there was a giant robot that was said to be on this little island off of Creeps, that this guy had landed from the sky, and his spaceship sort of smashed, and he started building all these robots, and they describe this. And I mean, a lot of people would think this is fictional, but if you read through it, it's, wow, I mean, it's pretty weird, because they're describing proper mechanics and weird stuff that it almost makes this sort of, it's very feasible that some actual being from the sky or something actually really did land there and do this, and maybe got these robots to fix his ship so he could take off again. Who knows, like some kind of weird thing like this, but this giant would patrol the island, and sort of if boats came near it, he would sort of come out, wade out in the harbor and crush them, and that's actually crushed the boat. And they said when this thing finally died out, all these robots and this guy vanished, he went back up into the heavens sort of idea. They said that the people started taking apart the robots and melting them down and stuff like this. So, I mean, fascinating story. So anyways, maybe even giant robots existed too in the past. But definitely giants and giantesses, all kinds of them certainly existed. Now look at this lady here, man. Here, she was the boss. Yes, ma'am, all the way. She didn't need Truco's spanking machine here, taken from a museum out of an all-girls Quebec school over at Hull from the 1800s. Ooh la la! I've been bad. And sort of stuff. She didn't need any of that sort of thing. She had it fully in control here. Look at this. Actually, sort of a fascinating character. Like, she's got a pretty face to her and stuff like this, and her hairdo's quite fascinating. Sort of unusual, but anyways, she was over 8 feet here, and I mean, look, and you can tell her dad's quite a tall sort of man, right? You can, I would presume that's her parents, and you can certainly tell that guy's quite tall. So, but could you imagine, what a giantess, That's so, I mean, certainly, she sort of, I'm sure, nobody wanted to be getting, her peeved off there. Don't be messing with me. But absolutely fascinating though. So, but certainly they existed. So, can you imagine if she had been furry there? I mean, there's your Sasquatch, right? So, look at this one here. Oh my God! The second I seen this, I just roared. Jeanguy sent me this one. Pretty funny here. Look at this. I want you in my belly. That might have been Fat Bastard's wife that nobody knows about. Isn't that a cute picture? Absolutely fantastic. And here's some cute couples here. I wonder if these two ladies said, "You better be delivering the goods when you get home, boys." But absolutely hilarious. But I love these photos. I mean, they're fantastic. But there certainly was a lot of giants and giantesses around. Here's another one here. She's with like the family. I guess it's some kind of singing family. Cute, That's her thing. I like her big hat against her and stuff. But here's an actual femur bone of a real giant human. This is actually real. And sort of, it's not one of those like the mostly skeletons you find on the net and stuff like this. This guy's an archaeologist here and stuff like this. And I mean, so could you imagine how big this dude must have been? Or do that or whatever, but I mean, can you imagine it? I mean, absolutely astonishing, terrifying. So the giants really did exist. So, but it was absolutely fascinating. Here's some more here. Look at this guy here. That's quite the outfit. I love that with the top hats. I presume they'd wear these big tall guys because they were common then, but also, I bet you it also added to the effect. It makes you even look more sort of gargantuan, right? Sort of stuff like this, but, fantastic there. So, I bet you, these guys could, look at the size of this dude's hands, man. I mean, they're bigger than that guy's head. He'd be able, just like I said, with these Bigfoot reports. So that gives you an idea, like, so just think of, like, cause the Sasquatch is even a bit more sort of, macho and all that sort of big furry and a bit lighter and stuff like this. But these same kind of hands would easily be able to pick up a person like this. You put it over their mouth like that, you lift them up over in this sort of bush line or whatever, and they vanish. And this could be the responsibility of these sort of missings in forests. Quite a few of them maybe actually are really from wild people that are out there that do this sort of behavior from time to time, some of the giant ones. But isn't that fascinating, though? But certainly, again, I mean, here's some more of them, and imagine if any of these guys were furry, the townspeople get rid of you run off to the cave system, right? Sort of stuff like this. Giants exist of all sorts, from our buddy the giant panda that was thought of myth as ages, and then finally proven in the late 30s, from what's it, 38, 39, something like that. Sort of when the first specimen was captured. Here this one thought is a myth, is actually a real thing. He's a giant sort of a rooster buddy from over in Japan. So he's pretty wild, quite the character, eh? Isn't he something? Yeah, so, anyways, we'll move on. Look at the size of this giant sequoia there. Wow. What a monster. Isn't that an amazing tree? That guy's enjoying himself. I saw some real huge ones when I was out in BC and stuff like that, in California a few times. It's just absolutely astonishing. I miss that region. That's a beautiful region, man. It's just astonishing. The home of Bigfoot. Absolutely beautiful. Look at this fascinating giant here. This one's here, very interesting. His skull was like 20 inches tall, man. Like, and it's an actual real one. It isn't one of these ones that they're passing around, where the guy's 800 feet tall and all that kind of stuff. This one, is authentic, so nobody knows what it was, because DNA is supposedly human-like or something and all this kind of stuff, but I mean, fascinating sort of alien-like sort of guy. Look at the size of the eyeball sockets on this dude. I mean, wow, pretty wild. Here's like that giant tarantula monster that I saw in Oklahoma. I mean, that's what it reminded me of, like this sort of a thing. Except the one that we saw there was full pitch black. I didn't see any sort of gray, like sort of stuff like you're seeing on this. So I don't know what species it was. But anyways, it was some kind of very look similar, like this big nose here. This real sort of scary, creepy sort of spiders. There's been ones in Africa and different countries where some are reported like 4 or 5 feet of sort of width across. Could you imagine? And they'll attack like small children and people and stuff like this. Actually come in and grab them. I mean, oh wow. I mean, that's absolutely terrifying. That was not something I'd want to run into. That's not a cryptid I'm ever going to be chasing. So, but as I showed you there, giant wolves, all kinds of stuff exists for sure. So, skeptics talk about the Bible and the Goliath. I mean, they found even right in the Philistine encampment sort of area where this probably battle occurred, and they even found the pottery saying with the words on it, Goliath and stuff like this. 100% the guy existed. There's tribes people that can use these slings and can do the same kind of damage. One one guy, an expert with these things, was able to you wouldn't believe, decimate sorts of stuff with this, with just a little stone and a sling. So, I mean, certainly 100%, not even non-fathomable story at all. I mean, it's the sort of, there was giants way bigger than Goliath. I've shown you all kinds of people that were right close to Goliath's size anyways, and this sort of thing, so certainly could have existed, and certainly would have been possible for David to have knocked this dude a little bit, stunned him with this sort of rock mat, no problem. So anyway, another sort of, but I wonder, here, this dude here, I wonder if he was singing when he was going along, we shall wolves and Dixie, hooray. You see him march along. Sort of fascinating, but anyways, great hat again there, and he's got the old American flag going, Mr. Patriot, so I got great stuff. How can you beat that? So here's Radzilla, this mutant garbage monster found in the Rideau Canal there. He breathes, he's up from the depths, he's 40 stories high, he breathes low protein, and he stands in the sky. He's Radzilla, and I haven't seen Bradzuki yet, but there's Radzilla. So pretty funny. Look at the size of that monster. At least he doesn't look that scary, like he doesn't oddly look like a mean mouse. He looks more like a sort of a big friendly sort of rat or something. I've seen a couple of real scary looking ones where they had a mean looking face on them. They're all black and stuff, but this guy has a little bit more of a friendly looking face on him. At least I'll prefer to believe that. Look at the size of that thing. Unbelievable. So hear this goddess on the right there. She's saying to the sword, you better be making me some fresh squeezed orange juice there, boy. Look at this guy, another Count Dracula sort of dude here. He's absolutely terrifying, and this big territory in there too. It's sort of thing like that. So giants have existed in all sorts, and I mean, so as you can see, this, like, I mean, clearly. But could you imagine that this woman here, the one on the right there, holy bazola roly, something wild, man. I'd like to see that in real life. That must be pretty entertaining. It's just unbelievable. But pretty funny. But I hear the San Diego giant. Now, get a load of this. This is full of the Smithsonian Institution and the original articles when they found it. All of their scientists had studied it. They paid tons of money for this thing. They did all kinds of stuff. All of a sudden, within 1 minute, oh no, it's made out of gelatin. It's so like, how stupid would your professors be that you buy off of somebody else that found the giant, you didn't buy it, you buy off of them a massive sum of money that would be worth like, probably about $1 million today or something, like a fair amount of cash, and you paid for this thing. You did all this, you had all these professors check it out at first, then you paid for it, and then all of a sudden you claim that it's made out of gelatin. That was stupid. I mean, I just showed you all kinds of people that were in this giant's range, including that one guy who was 8.5, whatever, right? So he was even taller probably than this one a little bit. So, I mean, but here is our mystery of the Sasquatch. This is really, some of them are hairy wild people, and like this one was, you can see the big cranium, the neck is different, sort of, and this stuff. He was a thinner, sort of, maybe a mixture of, he might have been a wild child of one of the ones where they raped somebody in the village or that kind of thing, whatever. Hard to know. His feet are a little bit not as wide as the typical Bigfoots, but I mean, certainly this is your answer of giant sort of wild people, sort of a thing here. And I mean, as you can see, all kinds of giants existed. So in old days, very feasible that some of them ended up living a wildlife lifestyle, and there was enough of them to continue a sort of population, sort of a thing like this. And of course, when they run in with natives and stuff like this, there'd be battles sometimes, and they would kill some of these giants and this sort of stuff, really like that, So, but anyways, how people keep denying this, I find fascinating. It's weird. But anyways, we'll go on next with the Yeti. has been seen for thousands of years, and contrary to ridiculous claims that say it was a 1900s phenomena, right? I did this show to clear up plenty of wrong information about it, and also then to sort of kibosh these claims of some guy claiming that he solved the abominable snowman and it's a bear. I mean, this is the silliest thing ever, and we'll go through that sort of stuff. The reality is that the bear he describes as a snowman is given a separate name by them, and they're fully aware of the bear. There's several actually cryptid bears in there, but they have names for them like Zuta and stuff like this, and they fully well know about this. So he's not getting any new information here. He's just a person that wanted to get himself like whatever, and these sorts of claims. A lot of these hairs, like I said, end up being human-like or other weird sorts of stuff. I also suspect that government sort of is told, like, okay, you're at a university and this goes against your evolution and all this kind of stuff like this. Whether the hairs are real or not, it could be that, you know, they do this like they do with the thylacine and other sort of creatures here, where this is shown to be factual, that they're lying about the hair samples and stuff like this. So that's one thing. Also, there's all kinds of, where there actually is ones where they acknowledge that they're unknown to science, hair samples in China and in different ones. So this guy did not test them all remotely. He's not telling the truth, because they already have them monolisted that they're not known by all sort of they're sort of ones, they have a catalog of every sort of known animal out there, and they don't match, yet they are sort of human to sort of monkey-like-ish sort of stuff, some of these hairs, okay? So that's one thing. But the hair that he found, these people actually know of this bear and sort of stuff like this, and one has nothing to do with the other. Here's a depiction back away in the papers there, you know, the snowman and the early sort of thing. It was dubbed this by just one English fellow, one of the earlier sort of writers, forget his name, but it's this, they don't really call it that or that sort of thing like this, and it was just a play on words sort of a thing, but this name stuck, right, and sort of stuff like this, but he's really not a snowman. None of these creatures actually are living mostly in the snow. They traverse up and down through the mountains to get to food sources. There may be caves that they're aware of in their system that they can use, and maybe even has thermal stuff in them, who knows, that are feasible, that they have stop-offs through their traversing back and forth into the valleys. But the real home is the valleys, and people waste their time looking for these sorts of stuff like this. And because they're way more adept, they can move way faster, do stuff like this. Their feet are wide like this up in these areas probably for this kind of reason. It bears the weight better in these kinds of things like this, because you're a big heavy creature, you're traveling across where you got to go over one mountain range to the next to get to your next food supply or whatever it is that you're doing. Sort of thing, and they could be different groups of wild humans, and also probably a species of ape or two unknown in science and things like this. But his claiming of solving this is, again, he's guaranteed that these natives have always known about these bears. They completely make them a separate sort of thing. So just because this guy found a hair of one of them that they're telling you about has nothing to do with the abominable snowman. These people all tell you it's ape-like, nothing to do with a bear. Sort of the descriptions and things like this. So this is complete just another person wanting to get themselves a paper out, and using sort of trickery, like where you're making it sound like you've solved a riddle, but you're not actually. The people don't understand the whole factual sort of thing of it, and that's not really how it works, right? That sort of stuff. There certainly is wild humans and an ape or two out there that traverse through the Himalayan systems in China and India and the different sort of touching parts, even Sweden's nearby. Right, we'll cover this sort of stuff. But here you can find from the 14th century apothecary books I'd shown you there of the ape men and stuff like that. Numerous different books you can find from China to all over the place, Mongols, all of the different ones. would use these wild people for body parts and different stuff like this, and they used to hunt them quite frequently. And Nepal is actually just sort of like a little minnow of the spot of what. So you got all these people searching for these things, but really it's spread out across the whole sort of like the Russian sort of forest alone is like 2 million square miles and stuff like this. So here's just some of the local names across some of the areas here. Alma, demon witch, female. Alma's really a female Yeti. Not as sort of a male, and a sort of thing like this. So a lot of people use the word Yeti thinking like, but reality, this Alma sort of, when they're describing that, is typically supposed to mean a female sort of thing, right? Like, so, but it's all thrown in. A lot of people will do this, just that sort of thing. A Bun Manchi, jungle man, one who lives in the forest below the snow line. See, this is where they really live most of the time. The rest of the stuff, like I said, the caves in more warmer climates and stuff like that, there's no problems with this sort of thing. But in certain areas, it could be that these wild humans and apes or whatever, this sort of things, some of these caverns may have unusual things that we're not aware of, like sort of thermal springs, and there are weird stuff, like some kind of stuff that might be possible to have like an underground jungle-ish environment in some of them. There was all kinds of reports like that from explorers in the Antarctic and stuff like that. So that's very feasible that some of these cave systems, the ones they know, and of course, family would train the next family, right? Like sort of thing, like this cave leads you to here, this goes to here, and stuff like this, and it's a wild man-like lifestyle here. The Kaptar, okay, there's another variant, means wild man. Michi, the man bear, okay. Mink, wild man. Migoy, wild man. Merka, wild man. The Migo, wild man. Kang Admi, the snowman. Zaran, the snowman. So depending, like you see, the people in those areas where they live more in the completely, they're not, the natives aren't using the forest much. And those spots, if you notice, what these people, they're calling them a snowman because that's the only time they see them. It's because when they're traversing from one area to the next. Urine, Chinese version, and many names for them. I mean, there's tons of them there. We're going to mention and stuff like this. Zerling, the Kumin wild man, male Alma. Okay, so Zerling Kumin, it's hard to pronounce these, but that's the male version of an Alma, sort of thing like that. Now, this is the one that he claims, one of them is probably the one, Zuta. This means cattle bear. Okay, they fully know it's a bear and describe it as such. Okay, and this is what I'm saying. They've always known about this. They make a clear distinction between the bears that live up there. They also know about them, and they see them. So these fake skeptic guys have always tried to pass this sort of thing on. But it's not true. It's completely in their languages and stuff. They have names for these sort of things. So when he's claiming that one of the hairs that he examined out of tons that are out there, he didn't examine them all. He just examined the ones that he examined, which was probably a small amount. Some of them probably might have even been from a wild human, whatever, different ones and things like that. But the one that where he did get this unusual hair of belonging to this ancient bear, again, there's probably one of the ones that they're speaking of, the Zuta, right? So, like, I mean, they've already sort of know about this, right? So, this is what I'm saying, these things are not reality, but people, the internet will take it as reality right away just because some guy writes a paper, right? But you got to read through the smoke, right? Sort of stuff like that. So now you can see that there's many names and places across range reported, and that the locals know of bears fully and do not confuse the two. And his findings are of below zero value, except to corroborate the local stories that a few types of unknown bears also exist in the region. So he did that. He could say that he might have discovered that a new type of bear might be out there, sort of thing like that. But certainly he hasn't solved the above abominable snowman mystery by any means, sort of thing that just completely silly sort of thing. But anyways, here's back in the day there, Sir Edmund Hillary there. Pointing at the Yeti, what they look like, sort of stuff. So, I got great drawing back in the day there. Got great photo. So the Alma type, these ones that have all seemed to be the sorts that are the most human-like. These are the ones quite often like Xana was and this sort of stuff where they're naked and free, but they have a little bit more sort of human-like characteristics to them. Sometimes they got clubs or primitive weapons or tools that they'll use, similar to the native accounts, like I said, in the on the other show there about the sort of natives talking about some could speak a primitive sort of a Douglas tongue and stuff like this, because some of these might be where they were sort of they're a bit more sort of for sure like wild humans here that we're dealing with, most likely sort of a thing. They average like 6 to 8 feet tall, but there was reports of some up to like 15 feet in older times and stuff like this. You get the odd one, and there's kind of a thing like that. In fact, there was these tracks that was found of a 30-inch one. So, I mean, this dude must be a monster, or do that, right? Like, could you imagine, right? Like 30 inches. Holy Toledos. Even, there's been like a lot of sort of even, Josh Gates, when he was down there, I remember they had found some sort of Yeti tracks and stuff like this. And I mean, they certainly didn't look like bears. And this sort of stuff like this. So, these, for sure, these sort of wild humans and sort of ape-like things do exist. And certainly the natives can tell the difference between this dude and a picture of a bear, right? Like sort of stuff like this. So this is not true, these things that they say again. But I mean, absolutely fascinating. Anyway, but can you imagine 30-inch tracks, man? Like, wow, that's pretty monstrous. But anyways, you can see, here's the range here. Okay, so Big Helga from Sweden, she's down up here in sort of Finland, has the same kind of stories. You got all through here, Moscow and stuff like that. Now, some are along the sort of borders of the sea and stuff like that, and up you get, in old days I'd heard reports even off of some of these smaller islands and stuff like this of sort of funny, sort of wild like people or hairy people and this kind of things like this. You have sort of Siberia, the wild snowman that probably killed all this, the poor Dyatlov Pass gang there, sort of, and that. Then you got down to Mongolia, China, and there's a race of giants that lived in Mongolia that were hairy, but can you imagine some of them once in a while, groups of maybe the village would chuck them out if 2 or 3 was born like that, they would go off into the cave systems and sort of live. There's tons of proof of this, of kids being thrown out in villages that were raised by wolves, by all kinds of stuff, like literally massive hundreds of accounts of this. And I mean, very well documented, some of them, and a lot of them the same thing. They didn't have speech. They couldn't be taught after a certain point that much because they already, that's the thing. See, the science wants you to believe that you were an ape man in ancient times. It's nothing to do with that. It's that the mind has to start being trained at a certain point and stuff like this. And the older that it gets, without being any sort of the training to it, unless they have a basis, then it's harder for the mind to sort of do this, and they become more wild with their environment by the way they're being raised. So if they're raised by friendly sheep and stuff, probably the wild man's going to go hee like this, you know, and sit around and chew on grass. Another one's going to do this and that. It depends on how they were sort of, you know, and a lot of sort of things like that. That's how it really works, and this sort of thing. So for sure, even from ancient people that might have got stuck from floods or cataclysms in ancient times that were a different, separate race of hairy giants and stuff like this, these different sorts of stuff. Besides that phenomena, there's also the phenomena of people being thrown out of villages that become wild, that also become their own little population and stuff like this. So some of these truly may be ancient sort of humans and stuff like this, and that. And you also get these same stories all the way down to Korea, Japan sort of still has a sort of a wild ape man or two floating around, this sort of stuff. And so, I mean, Iran down here, you have the, back in, what was it, 2008 with the 13-foot giant red-haired guy with the monster spear, right? In ancient accounts, like I had mentioned on other shows there, they mention a group of giants that lived in sort of Turkey and all around in this sort of region like that were average 12 feet tall. Different historians mention them and things like that. So, I mean, fully these things are believable, because I've already shown you people that are sort of starting all these skeleton finds and this sort of stuff, plus the Smithsonian admitting these sorts of things, and all this. I mean, there's not much really to debate here that, yes, certainly giants, how big they really got at one time, that could be debatable and stuff like that. But for sure, you could probably get within 15 feet or less that for sure some of these, there were so many of this sort of range that probably some of them for sure existed and may still do in our caving systems and wild forests that are wild humans in some of them, and a great ape or two that's with the same kind of MOs here and stuff like this, right? So pretty well this whole region all touches each other. It's all different same mountain ranges, and you're climbing back and forth and like this. And if you're still a skeptic, I dare you to go swim in Lake Baikal there. You might run across a Baikal dragon. This is a real sea serpent that lives in there, and that dude is absolutely, he's extremely rarely seen because it's such a gigantic lake that the odds of you being in the spot when the monster's there is like a zillion to one sort of thing, because it's like massive. Like there's supposed to be depths, they claim, in some spots of like 5,000 feet and all these wild sort of stuff. So there's an endemic seal that lives in there, all kinds of things. A walrus-like creature used to be reported in there that may still exist, and this sort of dragon where they say he's got like scales and monster, like a prehistoric looking sort of thing, right? So there's another fascinating lake, and that lake has a lot of sort of Alma-like sort of sightings along its borderlines from time to time and things like this. So pretty well like the whole coverage here, and it would make perfect sense that most of these wild humans, wild apes would go into sort of in the daytime and stuff like this. You gotta forage and feed, you're in the forest and stuff. The only time people see these through the snow lines is when they gotta traverse from one place to the next, and that's why they became more hairy and furry, maybe just out of necessity. The human body knows how to sort of do this over time quickly. Sort of things like that, and this sort of stuff, and genetics and different things. So, I mean, it's totally feasible. The skeletons, all kinds of them found around, showing that for sure in the past that people like this existed, so why couldn't they have still? And it's the same thing, right? Like, I mean, we don't find 5 million of these, we find them here and there, sort of thing, right? So that's the idea, is that they exist, but they're just not probably in the numbers people think they are. Here, Tibet, China here, you can see like how small Mount Everest really is. And I mean, all these guys going for these expeditions and they can't even find something in there, sort of thing like that, because the terrain's too sort of rough. It's really in these valleys below and in the centers that these creatures really live in the forest. This is where they should be hunting. There's also smaller races of sort of a Bigfoot-like phenomena that goes on there, where several of them might be tribes of some sort of miniature humans, of some hairy humans of some sort, and things like this. Consistently seen throughout this sort of region since time began, sort of idea. Like, I mean, you can record back for sure where they're talking about this, at least like about 1000 AD sort of stuff like this, but even way before these sort of things. But I mean, to perfectly where they're mentioning this sort of and hunting them, the Mongols and all this sort of stuff. It's massive eons ago that these things were caught many times, killed, hunted, all kinds of stuff like that. They just got less, and these our environment, all kinds of things. Wild humans, maybe because of more population in some areas and things like this, maybe they can't risk to come down and try and capture a maiden. They die out that little group, whatever, right? Like all kinds of stuff like this, because they're getting rare. There are reports all over the place, and most of the time. sort of thing like this. But I'd imagine there might be an explosion once in a while. Like, let's see, I don't know, there's only 80 years, but one lady happens to be like the sort of Brady Bunch there and has like 8 or 10 kids or something, and then, I don't know, 1 or 2 of them leaps out in the village, grabs some lady, and they have 4 or 5 kids each. All of a sudden now you got the 20 or 30 Bradys leaping around. Sort of idea. Sort of the thing. And it could replenish itself. So, I mean, all these things would be feasible. I talked to like several people that saw sort of Bigfootish like sort of creatures in the Danube region and stuff like that in sort of Croatia and Serbia regions. And Poland and stuff like up through these sort of European sort of regions, including the greatest story ever and explanation of Bigfoot from my good old friend George, which I cover in another sort of thing. But these people, through their sort of stuff like this, these wild people would actually sometimes sneak into villages and sleep in hay beds and stuff like this. The monks around that region can tell you stories about them and stuff like this. They come down from the caves once in a while and will try and do sort of weird things like that. So, but they're extremely rare, but they used to be a lot more common, they said, back in more ancient times and things like that. But this is the thing is that these creatures really most of the time live around river valleys and forests where there's cave systems nearby, but these snow type of things, most of the time you're actually just seeing wild humans or creatures that are having to traverse through it from one valley to the next. And that's why you're sort of seeing them. Otherwise, you wouldn't be, and they probably don't live there most of the time, sort of. Like I said, I believe they probably do have caving systems that they can hold up in, if need be, and probably know their terrain pretty good, but they sort of, in general, mostly would stay in probably more sort of suitable environments, that sort of thing. So, but here's some photographs here. This one was in Quebec, so I've got a 4-toe print found sort of thing. Here's another one like that. It was supposed to be like a 13-inch Yeti print. You can see the big wide sort of feet on it is different from our typical Bigfoot a little bit, not as sort of like a lot of them. But this is the best photo ever. How anybody can claim that this is sort of a sun bear or any of this, that's silly. If you look at their sort of photographs of their sort of footprints, they look nothing like this. I also, for years since I've been a kid, did experiments with melting snow when I'd be out ice fishing and stuff like this, because I'd come back the next day and want to see what it traversed through, if it had rained out, if it got warmer, colder and stuff, how big these footprints were they turning into Bigfoot footprints, because I'd heard this from skeptics all the time. Complete hogwash, this stuff. None of them are stay the same. You might get a few that will melt similar, but none of them will be the same. They certainly don't turn into toes and weird sort of stuff like this. Out of 5 zillion that I did from every winter experiments looking at them, I covered that in some of the stuff in some of the books about this sort of where it's completely fake. And these are was another sort of thing made up by people that obviously never really went out there and did these experiments, and they should. And I challenge you, go out there, go make your footprints, go and then wait till rainy condition or whatever, go look out on them, and you will see that none of them are all going to make the same shape and size exactly something else. And a lot of times they're crystal clear. I mean, you can clearly see, like in the sort of imprints here, are identical from one to the next, and like on this one coming up on here, and things like this. They're not all going to sort of melt and do that at the same sort of time like this. And this is a crystal clear print. This guy has a great big sort of toe on him here. This is not as sort of, they have very wide feet like this, but this is a wild sort of more of an ape sort of one. I believe this is actually probably, it could be wild humans, but I suspect this is the actual sort of one of the few ones where they are an anthropoid ape that hasn't been discovered and that walks upright and sort of thing like this. I would say, like, out of all the footprints I've ever seen, this one's definitely, like, I mean, it's so crystal clear. it has all this sort of proper indentations and stuff like this. I've seen other ones similar, where the exact same kind of toe-like sort of shapes to them and everything like that, indicating that this is a particular sort of species of definitely, and they may not be as big as some of the other ones sort of like this. So there's different sizes of these, and I suspect these smaller, because like I said, they have different names for them. I suspect that some of these ones, these 4 or 5 foot guys, 6 feet at the most sort of thing, are probably some of these ones of these sort of footprints, and this sort of thing like that. And then you get these monster ones like the Alma ones, or different ones like that, where they're super huge, some of them, and way bigger sort of idea, but with the same sort of flat feet quite often, and sort of stuff like this. Here's, like, you can see in the air, now, to show you well, like, I mean, that couldn't have been a wooden foot back in the day or whatever. You can actually see where the guy had pressed into the pebble, and it made an indent into his sort of toes when he was pressing down. And you can just see this sort of stuff like this. It's very sort of Ponga-like sort of ape thing like this. Here's one of the only known photos of a supposedly a Yeti. Interesting. I don't know what its origin. It'd be nice to know if it was sort of like, I mean, if somebody could prove that it was really an older photo, sort of, because it looks older, sort of stuff like that, then I'd be sort of in favor of it. Sort of, it definitely would look wild, humanish like, and it's passable to a certain degree, sort of like this, but it also has a feel of photoshoppiness to it too, and the lighting on the picture and stuff like this. So, I'm just leave it at that sort of thing like this. It's not convincing enough one way or the other, but I wouldn't totally discredit it either, but it could be authentic. Here was wondering, this guy, if he thought once they had him in the poor zoo there, if he thought, geez, they really exist. Right? I wonder if like some of these ones, especially back in ancient times, if these gorilla guys would be running back to their buddies, and say, I saw this weird sort of guy, man, he had no fur. Yeah, right, sure, bud. Anything this sort of stuff. But now, here's another sort of correlation worldwide that you gotta start to wonder about. Okay. And this is why I say a lot of these are probably some kind of primitive human, or at least if they're great ape, that they're extremely sort of intelligent, some of them, to where they're using like a language-like thing here. Everybody from this route to fighting them in remote sort of areas, so all this kinds of stuff to here in sort of the Russian Elma, they all do the same thing worldwide, indicating again if it was some wild humans, because we have similar like behaviors, we may have adapted the same sort of things in different spots, and this sort of stuff, and maybe traveling and teaching each other wild humans in ancient times. Who knows? But this seems to be like territorial-like sort of things. They do this for some reason. They break branches in certain parts and stuff to indicate either to another Sasquatch that this is some kind of a thing, and it seems very language-like. And it's consistent across the board. So these stories are from even massive hundreds of years ago. You can find them mentioning of weird sort of stuff like these trees being broken off, being found in weird sort of like strange sort of shelters and things found, right? So the thing is that those guys in ancient times in a Russian village telling you this story wouldn't know about a Bigfoot guy sort of here in California or any other, yet they're all telling you the same thing. But again, if they're wild humans, this behavior would make perfect sense, that it's some kind of they're leaving a sign to others of their own kind of a certain whatever meaning. You know what I mean? Maybe this means, watch out, there's a bald-headed professor guy that's coming by soon. How do you know? Like, I mean, whatever, they might have some kind of sort of a thing to it where they're using this as some kind of language-like or territorial marking-like sort of thing. So absolutely fascinating. Very interesting. Here, this young lady back ages ago, another sort of thing. I mean, these Sherpa people they're quite familiar with bears. They know all about this kinds of stuff like this. And this young girl had seen a wild man, and he was sort of like this. And out of all the stuff, they pointed bears to her. They pointed all this kind of stuff. None of them, that's not what it was. But the second she saw a gorilla, she pointed and said, that's what he looks like, right? And sort of thing like that. So that's extremely convincing to me because you're young, and sort of like her eyes is most likely most of the time is going to be like fairly in better shape and decent sort of stuff like this. You're a herder. So she's a herder. This is your job. You have to look all the time and observe it about the sheep because you don't want them being attacked by something or whatever, right? Or somebody stealing them, all this kind of stuff. So this is your job. I would suspect that people under this sort of thing, this is their main thing. They got to herd. They got to keep aware and look at their flock all the time and make sure nothing's going wrong or none of them are sick or any of these kinds of things. So you're going to be observant. So when this girl started looking at this creature, even if she was scared, just naturally she might have been more observant than the typical human being would be. And so I find her an extremely credible sort of witness, right? A sort of thing like this. And people don't analyze things like this, but I do. And I mean, I'm telling you, that's sort of an important key to me that this girl would have been a good sort of witness because of that. She actually was tending goats and things. I would know that you would have to sort of, I've taken care of animals and stuff like this. You got to be aware and observant of sort of, that's your job. You're sort of doing that sort of thing, right? So, here, well, not my buddy, but terrifying individual, but definitely I will believe to ever in this human history that an Alma is the one that sort of killed those, the Diatlov Pass people. I'm never going to believe that some guy, now I'd forgotten to tell you this previously when I talked about this Diatlov Pass. Can you imagine you're running out naked and everything, but you take your camera with you? You take your camera with you. You leave, abandon everything in the universe. You take your camera with you. You would only do this for that reason because you wanted to make sure the world found out what was on that camera. What I really suspect is pretty simple. I think that at one point somewhere in the expedition, they might have heard some howling, growling. They might have saw some Bigfoot footprints. They might have saw the creature once poking its head out somewhere or whatever. So now you're aware of it, but you're petrified and stuff like this. Maybe then the sort of, they sort of, you know, they're in their tent sort of thing like this and like this, and they see this thing coming out and sort of, and then once they knew or were aware of its presence and stuff like this, they got panicked and thought, maybe what if this thing comes and gets them in the middle of the night or something like this? So maybe that's why they split, because the slits were all around in a circle, okay, facing the forest sort of areas, because you're waiting for the dude to come out. So I suspect they must have been aware of his presence in some sort of way. I don't, like, it seems to me this is a daylight shot, so it's hard to know when they ran out, at night or in the day or whatever, but whatever reason, they must have either saw the thing, bolted to their tent, maybe he was howling around, crawling around the forest. They decided to somehow got a picture of him, some sort of thing like this. And then this thing finally came along, and this guy ran out with it to make sure that the world knew about it, that the camera wasn't destroyed because the tent was ransacked and smashed and everything like this. This guy's, you're petrified to death, you're running for your life, most of you are half naked here, sort of idea like this, and yet you're doing this and you still want to keep this camera with you. Also, why would you at the end put on it, the snowman lives on a piece of paper? Also, there's something that they don't mention that I suspect is highly what really occurred. There's a part in the articles where the lady mentions in a previous time somewhere on their adventure, she mentions about the abominable snowman that they was seen and all this kind of stuff like this. So she mentions a little bit about it. there's papers, it seems maybe a couple of pieces were missing. It could be that they panicked and decided to get a flyer going at the last moment of some sort and ripped out the sort of a paper sort of a thing for some kind of reason by accident, grabbed badly the wrong sort of part where it would have maybe cleared up some of this. Or what if the KGB took this when they first got there, and then this was what was left of the information to hide this, that the girl wrote sort of like this, and the other guy at the last second wrote on it that the snowman lives. There might have been corroborating stuff on there. If somebody could find out, I bet you this would be a good tip for somebody, to make sure whether or not somebody really did steal a couple of pieces of the book out of her diary sort of thing. If you could find out the model of the sort of book that it would have been, how many pages they'd have, and then see how many pages they have on record. And if there is a few missing, this is probably the answer that I would suspect more likely the KGB actually took it, and probably this guy was writing on his own piece of paper, maybe he had a separate sort of thing like this, or desperate to make sure two people knew that what happened to them, or to leave a clue there, so when they're running out. But whatever the case, somehow in the last little bit of moments, they probably took this photograph or took it previous and knew this thing was around. They were petrified. They decided to come up with this craziness to peek out through the tent and hope for the best sort of idea like this. The thing comes along, the guy's petrified that nobody's going to know what happened to them, and that maybe the girl wrote down that, yeah, yes, this Yeti's coming to us, or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden, then this KGB came first. They found this book, they took a couple of pieces out, and then sort of thing like this and removed it, or maybe the students had to use it for some desperate reason, and by bad luck they took the pages that would have been crucial to the sort of, to prove this one way or the other sort of thing like this. Here's another suspected sort of Alma footprint here. These skiers was out in the Himalayas and they filmed this. I mean, that's in a way in a valley. Okay, it's really hard to believe that you could get some idiot in a suit. I mean, there's avalanches there every second and all kinds of stuff like this. So, and I kind of suspect this is real, even though it's not a great sort of like it has a bit of suitish like things to it in some degrees. But I've also noticed by looking at 5 million orangutans and all kinds of weird stuff that some of them look really weird where you'd swear to God it was a guy in a suit, but it's actually a real sort of orangutan, sometimes some weird stuff like this. So sometimes the body would have a sort of much thicker fur, probably in areas like this where they're closer to snow lines, and they have not as much lush valleys around them. They stay in the forest and mostly get their food and live in a cave-like sort of thing. These kind of ones like that may sort of hole up actually in caves a bit more frequent than, like I said, I still think your best bet is in the valleys, hunting for these things around water supplies and stuff like that. But nevertheless, one way or the other, if even little groups do live in higher elevations here and there, for sure, to get somebody and a guy in a suit to be walking up a giant mountain like that and sort of like to take that sort of risk with an avalanche every second, everything like that, and this guy's able to maneuver through giant snowdrifts here, pretty impressive if it's a dude in a suit. And you can see it looks like quite a tall cranium on the head, so I mean, it's sort of it could be real, so I wouldn't sort of discredit it. I just don't know. But all I know for sure is that no human beings in this world are gonna, it's on a real photograph, the real negatives are there, that creature, whatever it was on that film. These people ran with their camera to make sure that they still had this camera. So I would think a camera would be the least important thing or anything unless you had evidence on there that you wanted somebody to see. And they found it, but they're going to deny this for eternity, sort of. So no matter what, definitely a Yeti-like sort of phenomenon exists. Here's one of them here, and whatever this monster was fascinating. I still highly suspect the more and more I look at it, you can see bulges up in the fur here. I blew it up a little bit. It could be that these females actually do have fur in their breasts and sort of in this cold region. That could be an actual pregnancy there. That could be the child sort of in that sort of bump there that you see down, and that's why you see on the side the ribs pressing out a little bit. Maybe it's its feet, maybe when they're that big like that, maybe they're pretty huge, right? Sort of thing like that. You can see muscular sort of a vein in the back of the legs and the weird stuff in the position. Even though it's an old photo and it's blurry and stuff like this, I just don't believe that there was a guy running around in a Bigfoot suit out in the forest. So no matter what, even if all these people were alive and they vanished and whatever, and a UFO took them, no matter what, so they photographed some kind of wild, giant, sort of hairy sort of creature there, standing there. This is not a bear. This is very human-like in every way, shape, or form. And actually, if you look very closely, you can see that there's a whitish areas where the eyes would be, and sort of a couple other spots where it's a little bit more barren, where there's a tiny bit of shade of color difference. I suspect that's the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. So even though, I mean, I'd be blurry too. Can you imagine some giant 12, 13-foot sort of abominable Yeti, the sort of lady or man here, well, whatever the case, if it was a guy, that was coming towards your tent there, I'd imagine my camera would be shaking too. So sort of stuff like this. So whatever the case, no matter what, these people, and the only reason why the KGB didn't take this camera is that kid that ran off with it, and they found it on his body way later. See, luckily, because if he had left that, this controversy would have never existed. You would have never seen these photos. None of this would have materialized. They would have blamed it again on an avalanche or some silly thing and like that. But this is a real truth that these poor students got killed by a wild man. The ripping out the tongue, the smashing word there, sort of, because something like that could be so strong they could just sort of give you a little punch real fast like this and sort of disintegrate the insides, sort of thing like that, I'd imagine. Like if they're 12, 13 feet tall, 10 feet tall, this sort of thing, 8 feet tall, whatever, and 1,000 pounds on them, with muscles the size of Mount Vesuvius. I mean, something like that could cause some severe damage. In fact, the first few, they had tried to run up a tree, and they were ripped by their nails. People they ignore the factual things about it. Think about this. How would an avalanche grab and rip somebody's nails? Like, I mean, they actually, their nails were ripped right out of this sort of tree because this creature yanked them off of it. And sort of, their nails actually got torn right out. You're that petrified that you're still holding on. And sort of stuff like this. And the height too, because this thing was able to actually just grab and sort of yank them right off. Sort of thing like that. So that's the only reason, again, why the KGB didn't get this sort of a camera, is because it was found way later by other people and it's too late, right? Sort of thing like that. But absolutely fascinating. So certainly the abominable snowman mystery is not solved by any means. Sort of stuff. So next we'll go on with about the Amumungo. This Bigfoot around the world here. This Amumungo from the Philippines. This cryptid ape-man first got more attention in modern times. It is likely an unknown species of ape or possible relic human. The scientists claim they found some new relic human there. Somehow they can describe a new species by finding just a little piece of bone or stuff like this. I mean, fascinating. It's a gorilla-like sort of thing. It looks like this. It has longer claws on it like this, and its print sleeve sort of like this. So this lady here, she's a bit furry sort of thing, and they got a bit more of a gorilla apish like sort of a face to them there like this, and they're a blend of taking, killing chickens and all kinds of weird things like this, and ripping out their entrails and this sort of stuff like this. So it's just another sort of interesting sort of cryptid sort of Bigfoot out there variation. But this one probably isn't a human. It probably is some kind of a unknown ape or some sort of thing that's doing it. Some relative of some kind of an ape-like species of some sort. It could be a wild human, but I mean the claws and some of the other stuff make it sound a bit more probably like some kind of a wild sort of ape-like species unknown, but an interesting cryptid anyway. Sort of thing like that, and there's been all kinds of different weird sightings of it. Apparently, even a few people were attacked by it, and they found disemboweled animals in 2008 in Kababungan sort of area. 2 separate attacks was around there, eating chickens and goats and biting their entrails and all kinds of weird stuff. And what's interesting too, though, is it seems to have pretty good intelligence. It actually waits like when there's army or patrols around, that it doesn't come out patrolling at all or attacking anything. They wait till it's quiet again, sort of, right? So again, sort of high is sort of a bit more intellect to it, sort of a creature. Very interesting. So the ivory-billed woodpecker, here my buddy the ivory-billed woodpecker, this magnificent bird still may exist. There's been quite a few sightings, and there's some excellent films. There's just one I saw a picture of one on a sort of a post there, and I mean, it really extraordinarily looks like an ivory-billed woodpecker. I mean, it's huge. It matches every sort of thing about it. It doesn't look like a pileated woodpecker. And so, I mean, I've seen some pretty good evidence here and there of this sort of thing like that, of different sort of ones that have been filmed in Texas, Florida, Cuba, different sightings and things like that. So this bird still may exist. I hope so. Beautiful, sort of amazing sort of bird, very interesting. But it's not a great photo. This guy was so lucky one of them actually landed right in his that sort of stuff like that. Absolutely fantastic.
I know you're there, Jeanguy. I've been waiting for you, Jeanguy. You don't call me Jeanguy. I am so mad. When I get my hands on you, I'm going to put you over my knee, Jeanguy. And I'm going to make you red. Red, Jeanguy. Red. You're very bad, Jeanguy. You don't come and sit with your werewolf. No more roast beef dinners anymore. No more Labatt 50. No, nothing. It's all over, Jeanguy. When I get my hands on you, I'm going to make you red rump. I'm going to make it so red. Oh! Please, Jeanguy, please. I am so mad. You have to call me. Call me, Jeanguy, please.
Listen, Jeanguy. This is Abdul. Abdul from Quebec City, Jeanguy. I've been told that Madeline's been phoning you. I am the fucking werewolf. Do you understand, Jeanguy? She's mine. You better stop phoning her. She told me you were phoning her. I rule this place with an iron fist. Right now she's cooking me halal poutine, Jeanguy. Not you. No more. She told me that she was making you roast beef dinners on the weekend. It's over, Jeanguy. Over. She makes me now the roast beef dinners. Do you understand, Jeanguy? I am the fucking werewolf. And you know what, Jeanguy? She described you. She said that you were like this little skinny man, French man. You know what I could do with my claws, Jeanguy? I can rearrange you, and I'll make you my second bitch in this house. The both of you be screaming day and night. I am the fucking real werewolf. When I get my hands on you, Jeanguy, I'm going to rip you from head to toe, Jeanguy. If you think Madeline is scary, wait till you see and get a load of Abdul. Hakrimai. You've really pissed me off, Jeanguy. Don't be fooling her again. She met me here. She said you left Quebec and you live in that Vanier, that French wannabe place. When I get my hands on you, Jeanguy, you stay over in Ontario. Listen, Jeanguy. This is Abdul. Abdul from Quebec City, Jeanguy. I've been told that Madeline's been phoning you. I am the fucking werewolf. Do you understand, Jeanguy? She's mine. You better stop phoning her. She told me you were phoning her. I rule this place with an iron fist. Right now she's cooking me halal poutine, Jeanguy. Not you. No more. She told me that she was making you roast beef dinners on the weekend. It's over, Jeanguy. Over. She makes me now the roast beef dinners. Do you understand, Jeanguy? I am the fucking werewolf. You know what, Jeanguy? She described you. She said that you were like this little skinny man, French man. You know what I could do with my claws, Jeanguy? I could rearrange you. And I'll make you my second bitch in this house. The both of you be screaming day and night. I am the fucking real werewolf. When I get my hands on you, Jeanguy, I'm going to rip you from head to toe, Jeanguy. If you think Madeline is scary, wait till you see and get a load of Abdul. Hakrimai. You've really pissed me off, Jeanguy. Don't be fooling her again. She met me here. She said you left Quebec and you live in that Vanier, that French wannabe place. When I get my hands on you, Jeanguy, you stay over in Ontario. Do you understand, Jeanguy? Do you understand? Listen, Jeanguy. This is Abdul. Abdul from Quebec City, Jeanguy. I've been told that Madeline's been phoning you. I am the fucking werewolf. Do you understand, Jeanguy? She's mine. You better stop phoning her. She told me you were phoning her. I rule this place